You're listening to Nightlight Radio Network. This is Dr. Bob Hieronimus, co-host of 21st Century Radio. We are happy to present this rebroadcast of our show on Nightlight. Okay, let's set up straight out there. Eyes straight ahead, no talking, and you can chew gum. You know rules and regulations around here, right? Huh? Okay, well, in early 1971, I began a hobby in collecting ET manuscripts, which grew out of my using various Egyptian, Hebrew, Sanskrit, and Atlantean scripts in two of the murals I completed at Johns Hopkins University in 1969. The first mural, as they call them here in Balmer, first mural called The Apocalypse at Levering Hall, and the second one being done for the postgraduate students called the Lord's Prayer. Boy, now, do you know the history of the Lord's Prayer? Well, we haven't got time for it now. All right. That was because the graduate students came to me one day and said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing murals for the undergraduates and not us?" Well, it's because I didn't know they even existed in that time. All right, so public television filmed a half-hour documentary of my life, and both of these murals are a major part of that honor. And as you know, I've just completed restoring the 2,700 square foot Apocalypse mural and have been asked by Johns Hopkins University to address their alumni this coming April. However, you can see it any time you want because it is open 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. daily at Levering Hall. I began to see parallelism between some of these ancient and extinct languages. Well, you can imagine my thrill when I learned, yes, you should have seen me when I saw this book, when I learned of How to Talk to an Alien by Nancy, and I hope I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Tertre? Well, I'll get corrected on that in a second. And published by our friends at New Page Books this year. And Nancy is with us for both hours tonight. Now, who is she? Well, she's known as the Skeptical Psychic, and a securities litigation attorney who became a trained psychic detective and remote viewer trained in military CRV methods. A magna cum laude graduate of Princeton University. Hey, I wonder if she knows our friend Dr. Elaine Pagels up there at Princeton. We twisted the night away with her. Now, she is a frequent media guest on shows such as Coast to Coast AM and also hosted her own weekly CBS radio show. She is certified in intuitive Gestalt psychotherapy and the author of several books, including Psychic Intuition. Now, her websites are theskepticalpsychic.com and talkalien.com. Welcome to 21st Century Radio, Nancy.
Thank you very much.
Are you sitting up straight?
Moderately, yeah.
Oh, that's good enough. We'll let you. You can be moderate in all things. By the way, what do you know Elaine? Dr. Elaine Pagels? At Princeton?
I didn't know. In fact, I didn't even know she was at Princeton. I didn't know her when I was there. I've certainly, researched her and know all about her, and have seen her on TV and all that kind of stuff. I think she's fantastic.
Isn't she? Wow. She
yeah.
really is. Yeah,
I can't quite imagine her twisting the night away.
Well,
but,
well, she did with us in a way. Yeah, we had a pretty good time. Well, when, how, and why did you begin your study of ancient and extinct languages?
Well, first of all, I have a feeling that you probably know way, way more than I do.
Oh, I don't think so.
Ancient and I'll bet you do.
No way. No way. No way.
Okay. I didn't start out studying that at all. Well, okay, let me back it up. When I was at Princeton, I got my degree. It was a BA. I got it in Romance languages. So that's what I got trained in languages. And when I was there, I was studying some German, and I've also studied some Thai. All of those being modern languages. And yes, I studied, Old English and Old French and all that, and they're like different languages. But I have never, made a study of the truly ancient languages. What's happened is since I got into researching alien languages, I've discovered certain relationships, and the way that happened was actually very strange. I was down in Florida. I was down there for a wedding. I was staying at a hotel, and I was wandering back through the hallways, and there was this woman who had set up like a trunk show of jewelry, in front of one of the boutiques.
Oh, yes, I remember this story. This is wonderful. Go ahead.
And it was just, and I like jewelry, so I'm looking at all of the sparkly stuff. And the woman she's got 3 very long tables, she grabs me from one end, drags me down to the other end, said, "Oh, you've got to look at this necklace. It's phenomenal, it's terrific." And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, okay, it's got these 7 they were maybe like 3-inch long leather pouches attached to it. And I'm thinking, okay, it's all right, but I kind of like the sparkly stuff down on the other end. But this woman, the saleswoman, and she's also the designer, she wouldn't let me go. She said, "Oh, you have to see it. It's spectacular. These are ancient. They're 19th century Ethiopian scrolls on the inside."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." She hands me all this literature, from eBay, tells all about these kinds of things. I'd never heard of them. They're called kitabis, and they don't do them anymore. And they were, as I read about them, they're like little magical protective scrolls. They're handwritten by the priests in Ethiopia, in the Ethiopian church, and they're written usually in goat's blood. Some of them have illustrations on them, and they're written in this, whatever the Ethiopian language was. And I'm looking at them. As soon as I look at some of these pictures, because you can't take the scrolls out, they're sealed. But I'm looking at the ones on eBay, and I'm thinking, oh, my goodness. First of all, the illustrations look an awful lot like gray aliens. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I'm looking at the written language, which, I didn't know it, I didn't read it, whatever. And I learn that it's called, I'm probably not going to pronounce it right, but Ge'ez or Ge'ez.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it dawns on me, whatever this language is, it looks stunningly like some of the alien alphabets or alien languages that I've been researching.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman knew nothing about me. Nothing. And so I said, you know what, I have to do this. So I got the necklace. And then, the next few months I'm looking, and I realized that the original book of Enoch was written in Ge'ez.
Yeah.
And that I think there are only 2 remaining original copies of, and I think the only one that's written in Ge'ez is the one that's owned by the Vatican. And of course, everybody knows about the story of the Book of Enoch and that connection to aliens. So for me, it was just one of those. It was as if. Now let me back it up. Aliens, in the way that I have researched the way that they communicate in a variety of ways. It's not just, language like human language. It's many, many different ways. But one of the ways is through synchronicity. And I do believe that was one of those moments where I, and probably this woman, were being directed. And there is no way I ever would have figured that out because I'm just not that bright.
Come on.
No, serious.
I can't
and
believe
the fact that this woman just grabbed me. I mean, I wasn't even looking at that necklace. I wasn't anywhere close to it. And she goes on and on and on like that was her, the star of her entire trunk show. And she knew nothing about me. So I do think that was one of those moments where probably we were communicated with so that would happen, so that I would then understand something a little bit deeper and richer about alien language.
Wow, what a story. Boy, and it's real. That's wonderful.
It's
And
real, yeah.
now I'm going to, I'll get into the questions in just a second. I got to mention this. On page 146 is my greatest hero on the planet.
Oh.
And I would never expected to see this in anybody's books anywhere. Dr. John Dee. I wanted to be in my Halloween costume at one time was Dr. John Dee, and of course nobody knew who he was. And they'd say, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Dr. John Dee, and I'm holding my hieroglyphic monad, and I'm showing you this." And they said, "What?" I can't use the language they did, but they said, "What the hell is this all about, Hieronimus?" But anyway, thank you for putting Brother John Dee in here.
I mean, the book wouldn't be complete without him. I mean, he's like a George Washington of this whole field.
Yeah, he is. He is. Maybe we'll get back to him but we got to get more serious here. But this book was such a thrill for me.
Thank you.
When I first got it, I wanted to read it right away, but I thought to myself, well, I got 7 other books to read. I can't do that. And so I put it in the middle of my bed, and every night I would read 1 or 2 pages. And then I realized finally, a couple of weeks ago, that the great moment was here, and that is tonight, because I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I know you think I'm exaggerating and all the other, but I'm not. I'm not, Nancy.
You're unbelievably kind, and I really appreciate it.
Well, all right. Well, now we'll get on some of the hard questions and see if you can answer these.
Yeah, right.
Let's find out if you read your own book.
Let me dispel any type of respect that you had at all.
All right. Well, we'll give you a shot at that.
Okay.
We're fair. We're fair and balanced. You heard that.
All right. Let's go.
Excuse me. All right. So, why is it relevant or important to want to learn how to talk to an alien?
Right. And for people who haven't had the opportunity to speak with an alien or understand that aliens are even there and have absolutely no experience and therefore no interest in any of this stuff, I would only suggest take a quick look at, a review of some of the military encounters with alien craft. And if you start to understand that they can violate our military and commercial airspace, they're turning on and off our nuclear weapons and missile systems, they have unbelievable mind control abilities. I mean, that is maybe harder to understand in terms of documentation, but it's absolutely true. They're abducting people out of their bedrooms or anywhere, driving along roads. And, once you see the capabilities that they have to control, interact, and interfere with our human societies, it becomes, I think, just, that is like priority number one. Why? And I don't understand why hasn't this been done or thought about an awfully long time ago?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really get it. I understand that the government has very, very quietly behind the scenes been working on different types of communication, interpretation, and, different types of cryptography techniques and that kind of thing. But they're not being made public. And, the more, it's like 2 heads are better than one. The more people you get involved in working on a puzzle, the better the odds are of getting it solved. It doesn't make sense to me that they haven't really made this study of alien languages a much bigger deal.
Well, I agree, and I vote for that. But we have to have a timeout because we are fair and balanced. We have to have a timeout here on the playing field. Do you have a good curveball? Do you play baseball?
No, not at all.
Well, I'll show you a good curveball every now and then. First, I have to teach you a slider, but. First, we got to take a break here on 21st Century Radio with our guest, Nancy Tertre. Is that correct?
Good enough. I'll go for it.
Okay, fine.
Hello, this is Uri Geller, and you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
I remember when Uncle Yuri came into our studio, he took over. Well, we let him take over for a couple of hours. And boy, if we get time, Nancy will tell you a great story about Uri Geller. All right, okay. I'm going to ask you question number 2 since you did so well on question number 1. You ready?
Yeah, did I pass?
Yeah, well, you got an A.
Oh.
Yes, you got an A.
Okay.
So, but look, I'm tougher now because here's question number 2.
Right.
All right. Now, have there been any official attempts to communicate with extraterrestrials?
Yeah, there have been quite a few, and in my opinion, they've sort of the ones that we know about, I think, have been almost ridiculous. I mean, you had the golden plates, I believe, or the gold plates that were sent off with one of the Voyager ships in hopes that maybe somebody would pick it up, as it went wandering through outer space. And I believe it was sent out, I think, by Drake and Sagan, who
Correct.
did most of that work. And it had a little phonograph attached with, I think, some instructions on how to operate a phonograph. And since that was done, and I think that was, that had to have been somewhere in the 70s, who's using we don't even use a phonograph anymore. Anyway, and it had, images of all of our, things around the globe, and it had samples of many different languages so that, they could sort of get a general gist of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have SETI sending out its radio messages, targeting specifically, or they sent out a message again. I think this was sent out in somewhere in the 70s, 74. I've forgotten exactly when. I could have that wrong. But they targeted a particular galaxy. I don't know if it was Andromeda. I've forgotten again. But and they figured it was the radio waves would take roughly 25,000 years to get there, and then if anybody happened to be there to pick them up, and if they happened to want to respond, they would take another 25,000 years to get back to us. At which point, really? So that just didn't make any sense to me. On top of that, it automatically didn't make sense to me that they're using radio waves, which just seems, even to me, it seems archaic.
Yes, of course. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
I agree. Yeah, but I got to tell you something, though. I still use my record player. So, yeah, well, I'm one of those guys. I'm 50 years behind the time.
Well, one of my heroes was Dr. Oliver Sacks, who just recently passed away, and he had written me this letter, and I forget why. I think I'd asked him about psychic abilities and whether he'd ever thought about it, because he was really a pioneer in the field of neuroscience. And he sent me back a really sweet letter. This was back around, 2001, something like that. And I looked at it and thought, oh my goodness, he's using a typewriter. He's doing, you could tell by the way, it was like hunt and peck, And it was sweet. He was just on a different technology. And some of us stick with different technologies for whatever the reason.
Well, I didn't even get to the typing technology. I look up to, I told you I'm half a century behind. But fortunately there's you around, so that puts us in good shape, especially since you have in this book a terrific bibliography. I'm so pleased by it that if anyone wants to know anything about some good sources, go to this index and the bibliography. It makes a big. I know most people don't pay much attention to that, but I had a wonderful time reading that because there were a lot of my friends in it.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I think you knew Ingo.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, you'll hear from him, and I understand he's going to be on the air in about 8:50. 8:50. He's joining us. You will hear them.
Oh.
Yeah. He and I used to have some of the strangest experiences. But well, look, we don't need that. We don't need any of that. But do aliens communicate by means of vocalized sounds or telepathy?
Well, that was the thing. Everybody always talks about the telepathic communication, and usually, anything you read about people who claim to have been abducted or have had some kind of contact, they almost always talk about telepathic communication. And when I was reading through David Jacobs' work, he's an abduction researcher, and I was reading what he was saying about it. He said, well, in all abduction scenarios, it is only telepathic, be it alien to alien, alien to human, or human to human. And then when the human is returned back to planet Earth, or back to wherever they started from, then they lose all of their telepathic abilities because, as he says, we all know we don't have telepathic abilities. And there were a couple things that struck me as just totally wrong with that. First off, and as you mentioned, I have written a book called Psychic Intuition, Everything You Ever Wanted to Ask But Were Afraid to Know. And I talk about how you can train into certain gifts. And as you know, Ingo was, he was the guy. He was the big proponent of, you can train all this stuff. And I agree with him, and I'm a perfect example. I was not psychic before I trained. I've trained into being a psychic detective. I've trained into being a spiritual medium. I've somewhat trained into medical intuitive abilities, although I had some natural ones before that. I've trained into remote viewing. So anybody can do it, and I always say, if I can do it, anybody can. So that's the first thing. Yes, we do have telepathic abilities. And the second thing was that I did a lot of research and discovered that I found tons of cases where and these are well-documented cases of abductions, where the aliens not only communicated telepathically, but also vocalized, so they were speaking languages or speaking some type of audible type of a language.
Boy, that was really very fascinating when you got to talk about, I'm trying to find the right section here. There's a whole series of humanoids in 16th century China, aliens in Brazil, tall white aliens in Las Vegas, Nevada, green skin aliens in Poland, and more. And then you note, oh my goodness, I missed my point here. I got so excited by this, but yeah, I'm sure
good.
I don't think you've ever done something like this.
Careening off the road.
Yeah, but I was so excited to get to this point that their language was more grunts.
Oh yeah, a lot of these. What's interesting, if you're also hanging around expecting an alien to be communicating audibly, you have a few things to consider, like, do they have the proper anatomy or the organs, the features to be able to produce speech like we do? Do they have a mouth, larynx, vocal cords, lungs, nose, ears, all those kinds of things? Some of them do, some of them don't. So you have to be very careful about what you expect from them. And I have given as an example, if you assume that ears are, sort of a component of usually being able to conduct a conversation, because you got to hear back and you got to hear yourself. It's harder for deaf people for sure. But for example, if you're looking, if the so-called insectoids and the mantis type of aliens, if you look at them, they're generally described as not having any ears. And if they're anything like our earthbound insects, they do have ears, but they're going to, they have ears in weird places. The praying mantis, the insect, has ears on its abdomen, Crickets have them on their forelegs. Frogs have them internally as lungs. They use their lungs to hear vibrations. So they could have the organs to be using for speech, and simply, we wouldn't know it. And we would think, no, they can't speak, but maybe they can. Mm-hmm. So, but my point is, once you figure out whether they're able to produce vocalized sounds, they might not be human sounding. A lot of these aliens have been described as buzzing like bees, barking or yelping like dogs, or sort of chirping or twittering like birds.
Yeah.
So they may make, and even if they're speaking human languages, they may be making simultaneous sounds that are off the charts in terms of, our hearing capacity, which goes up to, I think, up to about 20,000 hertz.
Well, I couldn't correct that even if it were wrong.
So I still get an A?
Yes, of course. Well, yeah, but, I think maybe someday you'll get an H. Remember H's?
No.
I only got one H in my life. And basically it means honor. It was they used to give A pluses, but then anyway, my one professor who was a philosopher gave me an H, and it was the most exciting thing for me in the world.
That is.
But I told other people that, and they didn't know what it was, so it wasn't very impressive.
Well, it's kind of counterintuitive because it kind of goes on like below F.
Yes, that's right. I guess you're right. It got worse all the time.
There you go.
Now, friends, can you understand why you got to get a copy of this book? You're not going to get. There's no other book like this. Period. And this is too early in 2016 to say that this is the best book I've ever read in 2016, because we got a long way to go. But I got to tell you, this is right at the top. Now, you're thinking I'm exaggerating, but boy, I needed to see other people pay attention to this, because people used to make, when I'd say get involved with this, they say, what are you wasting your time doing that for? And now I got lots of reasons. Yeah, now I can tell.
Really? Yeah, that's interesting.
I'll say, go talk to my mentor. Nancy will tell you why it's so important.
Now I know you're pushing it now.
No, I'm telling you the truth. Now.
See, I knew that it's like the Oscars or the Golden Globes. They always wait till like the week right before they come out with the latest movie.
That's true.
So whatever is freshest in the brain is going to get the top thing.
Well, I'm sure they're always fair, and they never take advantage of anything. Now, how many? It's like that ad we heard. How are we going to restore America? Well, one basic thing you got to do is end Citizens United, and corporations aren't people. But I'm afraid we're speaking preaching to the choir there. They're not going to pay attention to that. That was the Supreme Court that did it to us, but they had a lot of. Oh, excuse me. We get out of that. Excuse me.
No, I'm sorry. I have to stick with you on that, because speaking as an attorney and somebody who, I watch politics relatively carefully. Actually, I sit in my local government. And the Citizens United case, when that came out, I said, oh, my goodness, we have just watched the death of our democracy, and there's no way out of this.
Boy, are you smart. Damn right. That's the truth. As a matter of fact, the mural I did at Johns Hopkins University and finished in 1969 was just about that, which was we were no longer a democratic republic, and we were moving towards a corporate oligarchy. And I was basing that on just study the history of General Electric, or you study Chiquita Bananas, or you study, there's so many corporations, and I included them in the mural. And Johns Hopkins is probably the only university that it would ever allow a discussion to take place on their 2,700 square feet, a room, a stairwell, 2 ceilings, all about the same thing.
Wow.
And I am so thrilled that they have decided it's that important that the alumni of the university need to hear the story behind it. But we need to take a break here with our guest, Nancy. It's called Nancy du Tertre. something along those lines. How to talk to an alien. Can they speak our languages? Can they read our minds? Yeah, I think they can do all of that. But there's something that she says, and we haven't talked about it yet, but something that says that there's something we can do that they can't, especially in it deals with how deep our psychic abilities can be.
Hello, this is Ingo Swann, the author of Penetration, The Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy. And you're listening to the wonderful 21st Century Radio with the amazing Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
Well, boy, it's so good to hear him again. I almost cry every time I think of this. Our guest is Nancy Tertre. The book is How to Talk to an Alien. Can they speak our languages? Now, you ready for the next question?
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, I think you're awesome, and second of all, you have me crying because I didn't expect to hear Ingo's voice.
I'm sorry.
No.
He was so much joy. I'm telling you. One of the things we like to do is he knew good cigars.
Well, I don't know about that.
Wait, you don't? You guys didn't sit around and smoke cigars?
No, in fact, one of the first things I ever said to him, because he wasn't talking, and I was blabbering, and I said, I was just trying to make small talk, and I said, well, because he had his cigar that he held in his tweezers, and it looked ridiculous to me, and I couldn't figure out what the heck he was doing. And I said, I was trying to be polite, and I said, well, my father sometimes smokes a good cigar after dinner. And Ingo just looked at me and said, I never smoke good cigars. And that was that. He had me, I have held his cigars for him while he went ducking into stores in New York City, buying stuff, and I'm standing out on the street holding his cigars, and they were always really bad cigars.
Well, I guess maybe he's received the first good ones from us.
There you go.
Well, yeah, let's get into this part. Your mentor was our friend Ingo Swann, who joined us frequently here on 21st Century Radio. Please tell us about your relationship with Brother Ingo. So few people really know, well, they know what he's accomplished, but what kind of a person he was. He was really something for us. By the way, his artwork was exhibited with mine for about a year this past 2015 at AVAM, along with Jimi Hendrix's artwork.
Oh, you're kidding.
No kidding. Okay.
Wow.
Did you ever like Jimi Hendrix?
Of course.
Hooray for you. Hot dog. Yeah. We're going to give you a Jimi Hendrix guitar pick from his family.
Oh, my goodness.
You have just won. Jimi Hendrix guitar pick. Okay, my producer is making faces at me. Okay, so I'll get back to... No, I told you, she's my boss, and I cannot step out of the line. What?
I'm beginning to have doubts about that. I got a feeling that you do a fair amount of your own direction there.
Well, sometimes I do.
Yeah.
But please, tell us about your relationship with Ingo. This is a pretty sacred thing as far as we're concerned. Because,
and actually, I did write about some of, how I met him initially in my book, Psychic Intuition. And you probably knew him way better than I did.
I don't think so. We got together a number of times, but gosh, you were studying under. I wasn't studying under him. He pulled me up in New York one time with my friend Dr. Krippner, and he said, "We're going to test you and see if you can do anything up here." And I was trying to. I don't know why I was trying to hit a certain number, and I couldn't do it, and I got out of that. And Ingo looked at me very strangely at that time, because before that we never talked about that kind of stuff. But you had much better experiences than I did with him.
Well, I don't know about that, but I wrote a thing I have one sentence in my book, which, you know how sometimes when you write a book, sometimes there are things that you just say, yeah, I said it right. And I had one sentence in here that has always struck me as like, I just said it right about Ingo. And it said, Ingo was at once quixotic, charming, arrogant, sincere, contemplative, aggravating, funny, and cantankerous.
I like that last word, cantankerous.
And I said several times when I went in to talk to him initially, he refused outright to answer my question simply because he didn't like it. That I felt like I was back at school again. Well, maybe something closer to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
Yeah.
He was, he would just shut me down. If he didn't like what I said or he disagreed with me, he would start pulling books off of he had tons of books, and they were all dusty. And he'd pull them off of his bookshelves, and mostly he was looking at definitions. He loved definitions of things because everything had to be super precise with him. Not only that, but you could, I think he felt you could find the answers to mysteries inside the words.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of stuck with me a lot. So for example, I said, "Oh, well, I guess you're a psychic, right?" And immediately he just bristled up and said, "Oh, absolutely not. I am in no way a psychic." I said, "Okay, I'm sorry, but you're psychic, right?" "No, absolutely not." And then he got irritated. He stopped talking, and he started pulling dictionaries and things off the shelf. And he said, anyway, he showed me. And what he was showing me was basically that the word psychic is so unbelievably vague. It's like a giant catch-all garbage bag of anything that people don't understand that you sort of toss in there as, one of the skills. And so I kind of said, "Oh, okay, I get it." I didn't get it at the time, but I do get it now. But there was something about him. He was a left brain thinker and a right brain thinker.
Yeah.
And I think he had started out, I think he wanted to be if I remember right, a bacteriologist or something like that. But he was a scientist, but then he got into this. First of all, he got into art, but cosmic, but exceptionally precise kind of art, and it's hard to explain.
Oh, it is beautiful.
Yeah, it was stunning.
And it was such a good time to meet with his mom and his sister and everything. They all came down.
So you see, you've met them all. I never got a chance to meet them. I heard about them. I never got a chance to meet them.
No, it's not my fault.
Well,
you're not going to blame me for that. I had nothing to do with it. I was just twisting the night away with somebody else, that kind of thing.
Elaine.
Thank you for letting us know a little bit about that. One last thing. Please tell our audience what this man accomplished.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. I once interviewed a fairly well-known psychic down in the Edgar Cayce Institute down in Virginia Beach. She said, I think that once this whole thing with remote viewing really catches on, it's going to catch on big. Why? Because finally men are going to finally understand that there's some value to clairvoyance.
It's about time.
And I think she was onto something. And Ingo, being the creator, the founder of this entire, way to package clairvoyance, he made it a tool. And when it became a tool, it became acceptable to all different branches of society. And that was huge.
And certainly he is one of the great Americans as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure you probably feel the same way. And I wish we could take time and talk more about him. But he didn't write your book. So we're going to go back to your book.
But
okay?
Influential in its creation. One of the last conversations that I had with him was about aliens.
And did you talk about the experience he had on the moon?
Oh, yeah, we had talked about that before.
Well, I think that's probably one of the reasons why we don't go back there. for now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how many languages do aliens speak?
Well, if I knew that, I'd be a lottery winner or something.
Yes, you would have won $17 billion the other day.
Something big.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way that I look at this in my book, How to Talk to an Alien, is if you want to figure out, first of all, once you've decided, okay, some of them can speak, then the question is how many languages? And are they speaking human languages or are they speaking alien languages? In order to get that answer, you've got to go backwards and look at, ask yourself the question, how many different species or races of aliens are we dealing with?
Yeah.
And I have heard estimates, and the initial estimates, actually, I was just listening to something that Bob Dean was talking about, and he was saying back in the 60s or so, it was believed, I guess, in government circles that there were 4 different species visiting us. That has since, it's expanded quite a bit. I've seen the estimate of 4. I've seen, 57, 82, 160, and now I've seen something that's in the 300s, and I'm sure that there are more than that. And I don't think anybody has a complete lock and handle on the number because they have the apparent ability not only to look just like us, but also to shapeshift and to materialize, dematerialize, and show up whenever they want to, or from unusual locations, such as subterranean, from other dimensions, from other galaxies. So it's difficult to say. But what we do know, and what my research has shown, is that some of them have the capability of speaking hundreds of languages, alien and human, and just naturally, because some of these races of aliens seem to have very high IQs, and that sort of goes hand in hand with language ability. Some of them are using different types of technologies that enable them to switch between languages so they can communicate with the human recipient. They carry little spheres and balls and wands and boxes and things like that. Some of them have knobs on their that they can adjust, like on their headsets. And some of them apparently have an ability to bounce back information with motherships that apparently are outside of our atmosphere that specialize in language and language translation. So they're doing this in many, many different ways. And by the way, some of them don't seem to have the ability to communicate with us. So they do, body language or sign language. That was the case of the guy I wrote about in Poland. There were small, green-skinned aliens with apparently webbed fingers, and they couldn't speak Polish. They couldn't seem to speak any human languages, so they just did sort of, sign language. That's how they communicated.
Well, we're getting ready to take our final break at this hour, and I wanted once again to say that this book, How to Talk to an Alien, is something anyone that is interested in UFOs has to get this book. Really, you have to. And you can't buy one. Here's the reason why you can't buy one. You're going to get so excited when you read this, and you're going to talk to your friends about it, and they're going to say, "Can I borrow your book?" And if you do, if you lend it, you may not ever get it back. So, buy 2, right? You can do that. They're not expensive because that's how important this is. You're going to be thrilled. There's so much material in here that we're never going to have a chance to cover. And then you will be surprised all the way through. And now my boss is saying we better get going here. And, of course, we'll be back with our guest in just a few minutes. My name is allegedly Dr. Bob Hieronimus. That's correct. A lowly PhD hanging out in this part of the universe, but I don't know if it's a universe anymore. Maybe it's a megaverse. Could be more than that. And I'm sure our guest tonight could tell us that. But our executive producer, who really truly is my boss, is Laura Ellen Kortner. And she's famous in her own right. And now we have an engineer, Anna Caroline Caruso, who must be one of the greatest singers we've ever known. And maybe someday in the future we'll ask her to sing a little song for us. Okay? All right, but now, tonight we're talking about a book that I have been longing to, well, do something on for about a month or so. And it's called How to Talk to an Alien. Can they speak our languages? Can they read our minds? What are they trying to tell us? New Page Books. And it tells you a lot more than that. And it's been, well, we're going to present Nancy with a doctorate right now. Nancy, you have just won a doctoral dissertation. Congratulations. Nancy du Tertre, it's all your fault. Are you ready? So now, Dr. Nancy, you've got...
Uh-oh.
We got
now I'm getting really worried.
Yeah, now you're going to be in trouble now. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but what do aliens speak in accents?
Yes. And that was one of the coolest things that I discovered in my research. And, you know, I was so tempted to, I've done some presentations on this topic of alien communication, and I've been so tempted, but chickened out to start off, you know, approach the podium, stand there, and then, start to speak a little bit like this, and then say, thank you, it's my pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm so grateful to y'all for having me here. And then go into a little bit of something rather different, and to see if there could be a response or some type of an understanding. And then to go into something really twangy, you know, and then go into more of, like a New York City type of in other words, to go through this whole thing and to confuse people who had never heard me before, who would then have absolutely, hopefully, no clue who I was, where I was from, or, you know, what the heck was this? Because accents hold a huge amount of information about the person. So, you're in Baltimore, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So if I really wanted to do, I know what a Baltimore accent sounds like. I can't really do a good imitation. A Jersey accent, I mean, I could talk a little bit like a Jersey, you know, like I'm from here. It's a little bit stronger, but, you know, even something like that. But I don't. People have a hard time sort of pinpointing me. I've lived all over this country, and I've lived in several countries outside of this country. So it sort of got homogenized. But if I speak to you with a British Cockney accent, a London Cockney accent, if I speak to you with a Texas drawl, if I speak to you with an Indian British sounding accent, you are going to automatically know tons about me. You're going to know the location. You might have some idea who taught me the language. You're going to know all kinds of things. And it's the same thing for aliens, believe it or not. And what I've discovered in my research, and I'm talking about all kinds of case studies now, where people report these things. Mm-hmm. Some aliens speak with alien accents, and some of them speak perfectly in whatever the native languages are. And what does that tell you? I mean, one of my all-time favorite stories is from it was a case that started, or I think it was around the 1950s, and it went on for close to 40 years. It's called the W-56 Friendship Case, and it was in Italy. There was a small town in Italy where the villagers were having constant interactions with a collective of all different races and species of aliens who were apparently living in a 200-mile-long underground base beneath the Adriatic Sea along the eastern seaboard of Italy. And so they would interact with these aliens, and these aliens were ultimately interacting with some of the top Italian politicians, industrialists, scientists, and then ultimately with people over Europe. So it was pretty extensive. But one of these aliens, well, according to, there was an engineer named Stefano Breccia who wrote about them. And you know who I'm talking about?
Well, yeah, because I read your book.
Well, there you go.
But before that, I heard only rumors. And this is one of the great things about your book. You have many unusual UFO cases I've never heard of.
Oh, excellent. That was the goal. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
And I wondered, where in the hell did she get this? Excuse me.
That's good.
But wow. So that's one of the reasons why our listeners, anyone who reads this book, are going to love that, because I'm sure they have not heard most of these other cases.
Well, just briefly, just to finish what I wanted to say about that, was that he talks about, he said a lot of these aliens, what's really interesting is that they could get metaphors and puns and jokes. Now, if you speak a second language, that's like really advanced.
Yeah.
It's hard to get to that point where you can sort of get the nuances. But he said there was one alien in particular who spoke with an accent. His accent, he spoke Italian. His accent was based on the fact that he had learned Italian listening to old radio recordings of Mussolini.
Oh, yes, that's a great story.
So, which is great. So what is that, if you hear, and I can only imagine, what it was, but I imagine it was like a little bit, old-time, like 1930s style or 40s style of American, from the films, where they talk like this and they have that kind of nasally voice and it was a little staccato, something like that. But anyway, automatically, if you hear that accent, it's going to tell you something about where they learned that language, which means he wasn't having much communication with humans. The ones that speak with no accent, they are clearly having significant interactions with the human race in order to speak with no accent and to get all the jokes and the puns and the metaphors and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and plenty. There are cases. I was just listening to a YouTube actually just now before this of Bob Dean talking about when he discovered this classified NATO report. They were talking about instances of encounters with aliens where they were speaking perfect Danish with no accent, perfect Italian with no accent, perfect, I think he mentioned German, if I recall. And I've also got a bunch of different cases. George Adamski out in California was meeting with aliens who were speaking perfect English as if they lived in Southern California.
Mm-hmm. And that, by the way, that's another one of the great things about your book. There are a lot of researchers that will not consider anymore anything that George Adamski said, and I think they're wrong about his experiences.
They'll get over it. I mean, yeah, I know, and I've had my own discussions. Let me put it that way, sort of getting through that. I have a theory on this stuff, and I give you an example. My approach to alien languages, I call it exolinguistics, as a way to comparative linguistics, okay? There was a guy, a psychiatrist, Swiss psychiatrist, early 20th century. He decided to investigate this French medium named Helene Smith. She claimed to have visited Mars. She claimed to write and speak Martian. So he goes about it in kind of a scientific way, and he analyzes her, psychoanalyzes her, and then does his own analysis of her Martian writing, which, by the way, I didn't think was terribly scientific, but oh well. He concludes that because the syntax and the structure of her Martian language was almost identical to her native language of French, that therefore it was a made-up fantasy language. It was not real, and he dismissed her as a crackpot. Well, you can do that with almost anybody who's coming up with these so-called channeled languages. What I have proposed is that you compare them cross-compare them to actual artifacts or actual recordings. And by the way, I've heard them and I've received them personally, to recalled memories of people, contactees, abductees, people who remember maybe seeing an inscription or hearing a particular thing when they were in their abduction experience, and then they can recreate it. And then the third category would be these channeled languages or dream recollections or automatic writing, psychic intuitions of which normally get dismissed by scientists. We'll bring them all back in and start comparing them. Once you start comparing, then it gets really interesting because you start seeing there are unbelievable similarities. It's very, very striking.
I had hoped to put some of those languages on our website, but we've just had a strange, not strange, but difficult last 4 or 5 days, and it eliminated that possibility. So I was going to, but those of you who are out there that have been listening for almost 30 years, I'm going to hold some of these languages up to the microphone so you can see them a little bit better. Here, I'll take a look at this. I'll show them Dr. John D. because he's the man, and then some of these others, especially. Gosh, I like the Villa Boas script, if you want to call that. It's beautiful to look at, and tells.
His is in what's called the dot and line style.
Yeah.
Dr. Pezzaglini, who was a psychiatrist in Delaware, was the only person I really know of who ever seriously tried to do an analysis of alien writing, and he came up with 3 basic categories. One of them being the one that you're talking about, which is the dot and line style.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a cursive style, which looks like script writing, and the last one is geometric, which are more like different geometric shapes. I think there are more than that, and that's one of the things I'm working on. And in fact, if any of your listeners would be willing to share with me any recordings of languages, and be it channeled or actual, whatever they have, or writings, I'm compiling a worldwide database so that I can hopefully put together some kind of a Rosetta Stone, and hopefully be able to begin to crack some of the codes on these different languages.
Well, you're my hero. No, you're my heroine. I forgot. Somebody's got to do that, and it's really important. It really is.
It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I had to clean up the bedroom, so yeah, you can at least do something like that. But again, I hate to praise your book so much, but on page 159, let me just mention this thing, and then I'll let you go free. And that is this. You have, on page 159, an example of a tesseract, the fourth dimensional equivalent of an unfolded three-dimensional cube. In my research, there is nobody else that I'm much aware of, except for back in the 20s and the 30s and 40s, 1900s, that ever talked about this. This is a selfish question.
Yeah.
How did you bump into this? What material did you find this in?
How did I bump into a tesseract?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
I just did.
Well, it is something, isn't it? And again, I'm being selfish here because there's a lot of things that my heart loves about this kind of work, and that's the reason why, being an artist, etc., that I am so interested in using some of this, even if it's even if all the professors at Hopkins take a look at it and says, "Hey, there ain't no such thing as Atlantean."
And that's fine, by the way.
That's all
right. They
right.
don't need to believe in that.
That's right.
If they need to come to that conclusion by a different method, that's fine. They'll get there.
Now,
because there's enough data out there that you can start to work your way down that pathway. The tesseract, basically what I was trying to say was, whether you're talking about the spoken language of aliens, which, by the way, in many cases, well, okay. I have a friend who he claims to be, now this is going to get you, maybe it's going to sound a little bit crazy, but it is what it is, and I don't have much time to sort of get into the background of it. He claims to be a time traveler. He has received communications from aliens, from several craft that he claims are outside the Earth's atmosphere. And they have directed him to do things. They have saved his friend from immediate accidents and issues. At any rate, he's recorded, he gets calls from them, sometimes in their alien languages. His girlfriend has told him that he will lapse into their language. He has no recollection of it. He doesn't speak their language. He doesn't know their language, but apparently he does actually start talking to them in their language. They also speak in English, but it's really bad English. He's done recordings. I've heard some of them. They sound a bit like an Asian middle-aged woman, although it's hard to tell. And they're speaking very, very fast with kind of it's like they're bending all of their vowels. Mm-hmm. It's sort of peculiar sounding. I haven't heard anything like it before. I also have received electronic voices on the phone, and I've heard very strange things. But the point is, a lot of abductees, contactees have said that when they've heard alien languages being spoken, sometimes it sounds like they're being played backwards at a very high speed on a tape recorder, or sometimes forward. So they're kind of squeaky and fast. They may be dimensional, these languages. Mm-hmm. And so they may be much more packed with data and information than our very slow, sequential types of human languages.
Yeah. Yes, that was really impressive, but we have a time out here that we have to pay attention to because there are rules and regulations, 506 of the Penal Code, and we must pay attention to it. So, we'll be back with our guest.
Hello, my name is Paul H. Smith, author of Reading the Enemy's Mind, Inside Stargate, America's Psychic Espionage Program. You're listening to Dr. Bob Hieronimus on 21st Century Radio, and don't worry, neither one of us are reading your minds.
Hey, Paul, I don't know about that. He always... Oh, hey, by the way, that's Telesma. That's Telesma playing his little... in there. Great group, really very great group. Okay, now, of course, our guest is Dr. Nancy Tertre, and you know what the name of the book is, How to Talk to an Alien, and also let me tell you how to contact her at www.theskepticalpsychic.com and also www.talkalien.com. Now, I forgot exactly where we were when we left off about 4 hours ago, but...
Well, that's all right. I think you should call up Paul, and he'll read your mind.
Well, no. I'm not going to give him that chance. But there's someone you mentioned a while back, Jack Sephardi. Yeah, is that how you pronounce it? Yes. Now, he believes he could owe some of his greatest scientific achievements and contacts to the strange agreement he made with an alien voice on the phone as a child. Would you mind sharing that experience? And then I'd like to hear your experience with an alien on the phone.
First of all, he's really interesting. I mean, he's working on all kinds of fascinating issues in theoretical physics right now. And, I mean, he's just an incredibly bright human being. He's crazy arrogant, but he's unbelievably bright and fascinating. And he, in his own way, I think, is open to all different kinds of ideas. At any rate, when he was a kid, and it's a well-known story, and he's had this documented, in a number of different books, but I think he was about 12 or 13 years old, and he started to get these phone calls from what sounded like this sort of cold, electronic-sounding voice. And he didn't remember too many of the conversations, apparently, because he just didn't remember them. The pieces that he did remember, they were asking him, this voice was asking him things like, do you want to get on board with this program? We've selected you as one of about 400 gifted people, and, you're going to be meeting a lot of them 20 years down the road, and do you want to do this? And he wasn't quite sure what this was. His mother, I think, eventually started intercepting the phone calls. There were several of them, and basically said, leave my son alone. And so the voice stopped calling. But he had already kind of agreed to whatever this was. In retrospect, he has said that he thinks that this voice was, what we would call an alien. And as I said, there are all different shades and flavors of aliens. It's not just one. And that this was some type of artificial intelligence calling him from the future, telling him to create it. So he was within this time loop. So that's what he has that's been his life's work, to create this intelligence. And a lot of the theoretical work that's being done in physics right now has to do with, can you move forwards and backwards in time? What in the more popular vernacular is time travel. And they're working on it, and they're extremely serious about it. And they are, from the bits that I can see, they're rather close to it. And he has a very specific theory about how time travel can be accomplished on a quantum level.
Well, you had an experience with one of these phone calls. Did you not?
Yeah, I've had several of these phone calls. Yeah.
Oh, well, you only told one of them in your book, didn't you?
Well, you run out of time, and your publisher gives you a 40,000-word limit, and then you're stuck with it. So
many darn things are never in books because of that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, we have to cut out 150 pages here and there.
Yeah.
And we just finished the book after 5.5 years, and boy, I'm so sorry. There are so many things we cannot include. But that's not what we're headed talking about now. Tell us about your experience, please.
I started to, and by the way, I was not at all interested in UFOs. I wasn't interested in aliens, didn't believe in them. In fact, as I discovered recently, I looked in my book, Psychic Intuition, where I'm explaining psychic ability in terms of neuroscience, psychology, and linguistics, and I looked at it, and I was explaining that having explored the psychic and paranormal worlds, I was pretty comfortable and confident saying, I understand that spirits are within our dimension because I've experienced them with all 5 of my senses. I get it. Mm-hmm. I said, but probably for me to believe in a space alien, I'd have to see one. Well, be careful what you wish for or even talk about, because on June 19th, 2011, my daughter and I were coming out of a movie theater in a local town here in New Jersey, and there was nobody in the movie theater. It was almost midnight, and we were in the empty parking lot. My daughter pointed up in the sky and said, "What's that?" And there was I'm not going to bore you with a whole long story, but it was a craft. What I learned later it's been called a mothership. It was the size of a football field. It was sitting in the sky, about 500 to 1,000 feet up in the air, and roughly a half a mile away. And it was covered with 20 or 30 orange lights. It was boomerang shaped. And it was after that sighting that when she and I would speak on the phone, and it didn't matter if it was landlines or cell phones or any combination, we would occasionally get interrupted. So neither one of us could hear each other speak, but both of us could hear the voice that was speaking. And it sounded cold, electronic, like it was coming through a very thick wave distortion. It sounded male. It was very creepy sounding. It said my daughter's name at one point. It was very hard to make out any words. And then what would happen is that it would disconnect our conversation. And then usually for 5 or 10 minutes, we'd both try dialing each other, and we couldn't get through. Then that same thing would happen with her and some of her friends, and me and some of my friends. So it wasn't just the two of us. And the sounds that are being generated it's not like, you've got crossed phone lines or you've got little glitchy things going on. Those I know what those sound like. I mean, I've been around the block enough times. I know those things. This is something. One of my friends who heard this said, whatever the hell that was not of this earth. And she and I had never discussed UFOs ever. Mm-hmm. So they have, and as Dr. Stefano Breccia said, in the W-56 Friendship case, in the 50s, when they had these early prototype computers and early TV sets, he said, these aliens can target a specific monitor or computer or TV set out of a room full of them and communicate just through that device. So they're very sophisticated the way that they can contact. And by the way, Jack Sephardi ended up meeting Uri Geller 20 years later, as well as the guys at the Stanford Research Institute, Pudov and Targ, who Ingo was working with. He sort of met the whole crowd, mm-hmm. and Uri was getting also electronic sounding phone calls.
Well, he's had some problems at times in broadcasting because of that, and that's that's the reason why he, when he came to our studio, he needed to use the studio for some, and it worked out okay because we made a deal with the aliens. We have them we have them pay us twice as much. We
right.
tell them it's only going to be $700, and we charge them $3,000, and that's the way we get away with things around here.
And they don't know much about money, so I would imagine that would be an easy one to pull off.
There are so many other points in your book that I know we should get back into the languages, but I can't help but ask some of these questions because this book is so rare, with such a small book with so much power.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is when we got this book. I had it sitting on the bed, and it was the kind of thing that my wife knows that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read that one next, and she grabbed it. She grabbed it right away and read straight through. She's a faster reader than I am. Everybody's faster than I am in anything. So she read it and she said, "This is great. This is great." And for her, I look at things a little bit different than she does in this particular area because and you have probably faced some fear in this area, have you not?
Well, the funny thing is that after I didn't go into any of this, and I didn't go into the paranormal world until I felt I had conquered all my fears. And when you enter that world, believe me, it's spooky. I have seen stuff, crazy, crazy stuff, and frightening. And at that point, you learn there are negative energies and entities, and they're real. So I don't frighten easily anymore. I really don't.
Well, that's the reason why I want you on my side, so to help beat up some of the folks that are beings that come my way. So the you also mentioned that psychics may be aliens' greatest foes. Did I get that right? On page 76
and
there?
That was a thing that, I am trained in advanced controlled remote viewing techniques, and I studied with Lynn Buchanan, who was the last guy into the military program before it shut down in, I think it was 93 or 94. And he knew Ingo actually quite well, and he said that was one of the things that. Maybe I'm getting this wrong. Maybe I heard it from both of them. I think Ingo told me that. Yes, that's what it was. Ingo told me that, and I mentioned that to Lynn. And Lynn was saying, well, it's sort of he said it needs to be refined a little bit. And I said, really? How? How so? He said, they are concerned not just about, all psychics, that they're concerned about our human ability to remote view at long distances or be clairvoyant at very long distances, suggesting to me that aliens have psychic abilities, but they have to be in much closer proximity in order for them to function.
I am so glad. I'm just hoping, of course, that that's true, because I guess you may have read, certainly you know the work well of Dr. David Jacobs.
Yeah.
And his latest book he was on just a couple of weeks ago, Alien Plan to Control Humanity. It's a pretty tough book to read because he's basically saying that they got it all over us, and more or less there's no, it's going to be hard for us to defend ourselves in the future. But you note on page 100, and I'm holding it up to the microphone now so everyone can read this. You can't get out of this, okay? We got you on this one. Do humans have a longer range of psychic ability than aliens? You note there. And that just might make a very big difference. Am I just living in a world that doesn't exist? Is that possible?
I think you're living in an extremely special world, which I think is fantastic. But I think that's accurate. I mean, that's my understanding, and I don't claim to know everything. I am simply gathering as much evidence from as many different sources as I can so that I can get some type of a grip and an understanding on this really fascinating phenomenon that people tend to, as you just mentioned, get really frightened of, or they get too confused by it, or it's like not within their reality box, as Ingo would have said, and so they just don't want to deal with it. So based on that, I think there's a good chance that we humans have this very special ability, which we should all be learning. And by the way, I became a better lawyer after I trained to become a psychic. Everybody should be training. Everybody should know something about the law, and everybody should know something about psychic ability, because it puts you on a super highway of knowledge. You get there faster. And I think if we all did this, we would increase. I mean, it sort of puts us on maybe this spiritual evolution that a lot of New Agers talk about. You know, that the aliens are trying to help us with our spiritual evolution and move us forward and all that. Well, if we all trained in psychic skills, we'd become quite a bit more powerful.
Yeah.
It's sort of a dormant ability in humans. And I'm not as negative about, where we're going as David Jacobs is. I'm just not.
Well, there are very few people are. Well, no, that's wrong. I'm wrong. The extreme fundamentalists, the Christian fundamentalists, basically say that all aliens are satanic. Well, I think their fear is just overwhelming in this particular area. But I am afraid of my boss over there, who's saying I am once again breaking rules and regulations. And I got to be careful because, again, she's bigger than I am. So we're taking a break here, and we'll be back with Nancy du Tertre, Dr. Nancy now. She has just won a free trip to Bermuda, as we're going to lend her my Rolls Royce tomorrow so she can drive it wherever she needs to go. But just got to remind her it only gets 8 miles to the gallon. We'll be back with Nancy in just a few minutes.
Hello, this is Robert Salas, author of Unidentified, the UFO Phenomenon. My website is spiralgalaxy.org. and you are listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
Hey, Robert. Hey, Uncle Robert. Mr. Salas. I mispronounced your name only 22 times when you were joining us, and I apologize for that. But are you listening tonight, Robert? I got to tell you this, Robert, and that's this. I'm going to have to quote you in our book that we're going to introduce to all the alumni at Johns Hopkins University. And it's all your fault, Robert, because you did such a good job. Thank you. Now, let's get back with Dr. Nancy Tertre, and here is the question.
I have to stop you there. Really, truly, you got to stop calling me doctor.
Why not?
Because I'm going to start getting used to it.
Well, you should get used to it. I mean, you do a superior job. Come on, really,
No.
you do. You know, and that it's so thrilling to know another person that realizes how important this is. I could have talked to my dogs all day, and they wouldn't have paid attention to this. I got smart dogs. We got 5 of them now.
Wow.
But here's the important question for a free trip to Bermuda and a carton of Pepsi. Now, we'll give you a...
Ooh.
You want a carton of Pepsi?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, here goes. What messages are aliens telling us?
Okay. So, and this is what I always try to explain to people first, which is the messages. That's what everybody wants to know first, right off the bat. That's the sexy information piece of this.
Oh.
What nobody really wants to do is invest the time and the energy into understanding the languages that you need to understand their languages or the way they communicate in order to know precisely what their messages mean. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody kind of jumps at it. And by the way, I have read many books by people who have channeled alien languages either by themselves or people who go under hypnosis or regressions or work with a partner who then asks them questions and they channel it or any number of different things. And they're coming up with some very interesting bits of information. But the messages themselves, I mean, if you look at what contactees are typically being told, I mean, it's that we need to spiritually evolve, and that we need to become better stewards of the earth, and that we need to understand that everything that we do on Earth has a sort of ripple effect throughout the cosmos because we're all interrelated. Even though we might think that aliens are literally alien to us, they're connected to us. And if you go back to Ingo's artwork, as you know, he understood that concept of interconnectedness. He was friendly, I think, also with I don't know if you know Alex Gray.
Do I know Alex Gray?
Is he a friend of yours?
Yes, of course.
Well, okay, there you go.
Oh,
I mean,
excuse me.
He understands the interconnectedness. I mean, if you travel into these realms, you understand. And ultimately, by the way, science is following. Science is not in the lead on this. Science is following. It's the people who have this more sort of spiritual, telepathic, clairvoyant type of understanding of what time is and what particles are and what space is and all that kind of stuff who get it. At any rate, if you look at some of the messages that have been communicated, and I just give you 2. One was to a South African shaman, and he didn't know what to do with this message. It was given to him, I believe, by an alien with flaming red hair, and the message was, in the vastness of the cosmos, there is a thinking brain. And he said, what the heck am I supposed to do with that? I'm just this South African shaman. What the heck?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's another message that I cite in the book also. It was given to a British housewife from an alien who said he was from some planet or location called Garnazavarn. And his message was, the deity itself dwells at the heart and core of the atom. So if you think about both of those messages, they're very hermetic in the sense that they talk about how the microcosm contains the macrocosm. It's all about interconnectedness. You know, the small contains the large, and that we need to be aware of that. And it comes down to really understanding the conscious universe. You also have, I mean, apparently some of the messages that were being interpreted by the NSA in their declassified 2011 document, where they're talking about receiving messages from outer space. They don't say exactly how they got them, but they used different types of their cryptographer, I guess, was deciphering them numerically, and found that they're talking about different types of, our periodic table, different types of rare earth elements, metals, things like that. And I have run across other contactees who've talked about receiving some type of messages about metals like titanium, things like that. So apparently they're interested in our metals. Well, we're interested in theirs, so it seems, fitting that they would be interested in ours and our chemical composition and all that kind of stuff. It's a way, it's sort of a hello, how do you do? And by the way, maybe what can we trade with you? And it goes a little bit back to, the Zacharias Sitchin ideas of, a human slave species being created by the Anunnaki for the purposes of mining gold.
Mm-hmm. We're nearly out of time.
Sure.
So I'm breaking in here. Have other types of aliens warned us of great changes for our planet?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, there are some great changes coming, I think. That's what the Apocalypse mural is all about. But what is the information, however, that experiencers say is the most often communicated to them by aliens?
Is, cataclysmic disasters, either man-made through warfare or through destruction of our planet and our environment. And we seem to be working, on all of those fairly consistently, which is why it's very, very important people get the message that we need to reduce violence and take better care of our environment and get active. I mean, that's why I sit in my local government.
Yeah.
I started an environmental group, and we were successful. Everybody needs to get involved in the act, and that's why Citizens United was so devastating.
Yeah.
Because corporations were given the opportunity to control us for whatever the private interests are, and that's not necessarily our interest.
That's for sure. And one of the things I want to quote on page 130 that you said, and that is, love is the only important thing, and that the race must evolve spiritually, like you said earlier, in order to save the world from imminent catastrophic global disasters. So we got to elevate our consciousness, and that's what we try to do on this show, and we're almost out of time. This has been a great thrill for me, Nancy. I want to thank you for joining us for 2 hours. I know you're a very busy person, but this is something that a show that I'll listen to many times, and certainly with our listeners as well. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and it's been an amazing opportunity for me. I'm very, very grateful.
And that's the show. 21st Century Radio is produced by Hieronimus and Company. Our executive producer and research assistant is Laura Kortner. Our engineer is Anita Brockington, and I'm Dr. Bob Hieronimus.